Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to do a little bit of messing about tonight, really, for the most part. Working on making some tops earlier. But I do have an upcoming class, not actually till February. It's over at Woodcraft. It's going to be a candlestick holder. I think that's what we're going to work on tonight. They actually originally gave me the one. They actually have a kit at Woodcraft. And pretty much, I looked at the kit and it's kind of as far as I wanted to go with it because it really did not suit me as something I wanted to make. Had two metal pieces, you would have had basically one small piece of wood on it. It was kind of, I don't know if I want to be mean and say it was chintzy, but that's what I would call it. I think that piece there is going to be big enough for the base. So we're going to have two pieces. Have a base piece and a upright piece. So this is a square block of cherry. Look like a good thing to use for the base. A piece of cherry and a piece of walnut. It's not a very nice piece of walnut. Hopefully you can get out of what I want to get. Got some cracks in it, but we'll just deal with what we got. Ooh, it's not long enough. Kind of need to invest in another ruler. The one that's 18 inches long and one that's only 6 inches long. Kind of need one in between, I guess. Shouldn't say that. I think I do have other ones over there that are that. So just give it a corner, center to center. Doesn't really matter whether it's perfect or not because it's going to get. You could have just left the chuck on there and jammed it up against the chuck. That's just as good a way of doing it as to put something else. So Merry Christmas to you too. Hopefully you're staying indoors tonight where it's nice and warm. I was just out a bit ago and it's getting rather chilly. Or is rather chilly. It's probably been rather chilly all day, but I've been pretty much down here most of the day, so yeah, I watched a little bit of the Penn State game myself this afternoon. I had to get the YouTube TV, which all I wanted to do was watch a little bit of that football game. So now I got to turn around and I do not like using a cone center. Made a bigger dimple in there than what I wanted. I think I'll take that cone out. I watched some of the first half. I didn't watch all the first half. I told my wife, I said, I'm going back. I said, I'm going back to my little shop. I said, this is a waste. There wasn't really even a game, so as far as I was concerned. Need a little bit more room. Just extend our live center out a little bit further. I can back a tool rest up just a little bit. There's a little wormhole in there. This is going to be a candlestick. At least my rendition of one, put it that way. This is something that the guy that's sort of in charge of the classes over at Woodcraft, he's like, well, that would be a good beginner's class. I'm like, okay. And they have a kit over there that gives you has a two brass pieces, or probably brass plated pieces of some sort. And I got one of the kits, and they really didn't excite me. I felt they were kind of rather chintzy. So I just sort of took the kit back over and I said, the candlestick sounds like a kind of a good, simple sort of beginner's type project. I guess it would make more sense if we were doing that in two variations, maybe. I've moved some of these cameras around, so I was working on recording a little bit of stuff this afternoon too. That should work. Right now, all I'm after is just get this thing on the truck so that I can flip it around and get a different hold. Yeah, he's doing. I just talked to him right before I come downstairs here. He's doing pretty good. He, well, they put him on some steroids or something or other. He said he was out and about a little bit today, a little bit yesterday. He said his shoulder's doing pretty good, which is good because he doesn't need to be sitting at home. You need to keep him active and entertained. Okay, so this is the base. This is where I decided I should start, would be the base, I think. This stuff is about an inch and an eighth thick, something like that. It's just flat stock cherry. Basically, offcuts of cherry lumber. Yeah, he didn't say anything about that, but I know he was a little apprehensive about driving because, it is his right shoulder that, basically he fell on and was bothering him. So he was a little bit uncomfortable, which was a good thing. I gotta sort of commend him on that. That he felt that it wasn't necessarily in his best interest to be driving, which is a good thing. That's If you're not comfortable with it, you shouldn't do it. So we'll get that semi-round out there. Not quite there yet. This is kind of what you call design as you go. And I should have set my dividers. There's a little bit more to take off of there. I gotta get rid of the dark from it drying. This is all air dried. I think the ideal scenario is to make a little bit of a recess in there. Question is, do we use the small? I think the small jaws that go in there is about 2 inches. That's probably good enough. Doesn't have to be a, certainly doesn't have to be a perfect circle. And it's not a very big piece, so it's not like we're holding much material. But we'll create a recess for that to fit in. Make it a little deeper than what I really need it to at this point, because I still got to shape a little bit. Take this center down. Don't necessarily need to take that center down too super far. Now I probably need something that's still in my bag. This is kind of the interesting part, or maybe you want to call it a little bit of a pain of doing classes. I have things still packed in. I have lots of things that are still packed in my bag from doing the class, because it just worked out that um, my classes sort of got bunched together. Oh, yeah, I'll bet. I'll bet. Yeah, it would not. Wouldn't have been my kind of day to be sitting outside. Although, I mean, I do have to go to work tomorrow. But yeah, one of the guys I work with went to the Eagles and Steelers game. I guess that was last weekend. But he had some box seats, so he wasn't sitting out in the cold. He said it was fun, but it was also very cold. Fairly cold, put it that way. So we'll give this thing a little taper. Oh, no thank you. I've never even, I mean, I know where this, I think I've been past that stadium up there. It's actually, if I remember right, I don't think it's very far from the UPS facility that's there. I think you could see the stadium. question is, it's more than enough paper in there. Do we put, I think that would look nicer, maybe. I like to try and hide the recess if I'm going to use a recess with a bead. I know I had the big beading tool over in the bag. I think the smaller 3/16 might look nicer. Yeah. Yeah. I'll give it a little decorative look. Back up a little bit and we will redo our recess a little bit. Just give it a little bit of a hint of a dovetail underneath there. It does not take, especially on something that small, it does not take very much to actually be able to hold it. So I think that part will work. Now we can come back over here, make that little dome. Gives it a little bit of a decoration in there. Need to do something there. Get maybe a little chamfer in there into that corner. Something like that. It gives me, by the looks of it, a 1/4 of an inch sort of a flat area on the outside. Everything else below that is recessed in. This is kind of fun to sort of design as you go rather than, that's about 4 inches. That should be enough, I would think. Maybe more than what I need. Yes. Guess I could sand that just a little bit. Might as well. I won't have any other time to be able to do it. not going to get very carried away on sanding it. Get rid of that. And then we should be able to flip this around. It's probably way too big of a diameter for that recess. But it's good and solid, so that should work. This now will give it some sort of a little bit of a shape. And let's see what we did here. It should be somewhere over, it's about 1 3/8. And this stuff is 1 3/4 square. I think my thinking is it's going to be easier if we just make this simple. Maybe just a little bit of a cove, something like that. Don't really want to. Don't really want a protrusion up there though. So a little flat. Going into that. And make sure this is going to be it's 1.5 inches. Be a little smaller than that, I think. And we'll go back to our scraper because I can make that. That wants to be flat or maybe a tiny bit concave. We're going to drill a hole in there anyhow. Yeah, it's just the opposite. We got a hump in the middle, but we get away from that hump. And hump the whole way across. Lots of vermin holes. Not necessarily what I wanted to see, but this is just kind of the trial piece. And we'll try and smooth it up. There's a little bit of disturbed grain there. Things like that took care of that. Thanks. I think that'll work. We'll grab some sandpaper, which is another one of the things that's still in the bag. I didn't want to pack too much stuff. I have another class on the 11th of January. Also going to the farm show on the 4th of January. So not a whole lot of point in taking too much stuff out. Farm show will be all pretty much making tops all day. Should be a, guess, a fun day. I don't know. Got a bunch of stuff ready to go today. I had made some. I signed up for the 9:30 to 2:30. That's the only one I can. That's really the only one I could do. I mean, it doesn't. It opens on Saturday anyhow. Would have been nicer if it would open on Friday, but it opens Saturday, so that's what we're going to do. The 9:30 to 2:30. Same place as last year. We'll be down in the down towards McClay Street. As far as I know, we're going to be like right beside. We're normally right with the Pennsylvania Forestry Association. I'm just kind of assuming we're in the same place. I haven't been told either way yet. The wife will take me over. Well, if we usually get parking passes. If not, then the wife will just take me over and drop me off. and then come back at the end of the day to pick me up. Okay, so that's that. I think we're going to drill an inch hole. And here's the interesting part of how deep can we go. I don't really want to poke out the other side. That's the plan not to do. At least as it stands of last night, I will be the only one there on Saturday morning as far as the turning club goes. We don't get, unfortunately, we don't get a whole lot of attendance from turning people from the club, which is kind of a shame because, I mean, oops, that looks more than deep enough. It's probably close to 3/4 of an inch deep. Just about. Yeah, I probably don't want to go any deeper either. That should be more than enough to hold that, if that's my thinking. And hopefully my thinking isn't that it shouldn't be that overly involved of a piece. I need to drill. That's basically the base complete. At least that's my plan. That's the base. So we need the top for the stem. I have no idea how long they should be. This is just a piece that we're laying over here. So we're just going to call it that. Might be thinking a little bit outside the box there. That might be a little bit too tall. Hmm. That would make my candlestick almost 10 inches tall. Hmm. If I just whack a little bit off of that, because I don't think, to me, that looks like that's going to be too tall. I'm going to take a whole inch off of it, but also gets rid of a little bit of a split on the corner. So now we can find our centers on that. Or a center. I really don't need both. Just need one. I'm going to put it back in the chuck just as it is. And we'll center up on that and drill a hole. And that would be for the cup. Where that crack comes out. Maybe I should rethink that a little bit. This has like what would have been a branch or something came through there. That's the cup. Maybe I should drill the other end. It's only a little piece of wood, so I'm not going to get too excited about it. And go with what we got as far as it's marked. Hopefully these jaws will go wide enough. And they should, yes. So, my memory serves me right for some ungodly reason. 7/8 of an inch is the size that they use for this kind of stuff. This looks too small. Another one of them scenarios of that thought. Oh, I have a one of them cheap candles from the dollar store. I guess I could measure that. It doesn't really have the Oh, thanks for joining. Yeah, 7/8 looks like the number. Don't know why that would stick in my mind, but it does. So back off the chuck a little bit so I can move it. I have a center mark. I'll just put the center of the drill bit in there. And we'll tighten things up. And we will drill a hole. How deep do we want to drill the hole? Another good question. Probably about an inch. So the quill on this lathe actually has a measuring on it. So we'll just go with that. And we'll see whether that's even remotely accurate. That could be fun. Also can be a large pain in the you know what. Somehow I think I shoved my drill bit back in. Oh, maybe not. I usually let my dad play around with the Christmas ornaments. I don't necessarily have the patience for them, for one. I gotta go deeper. And they don't, there's something that it, if you take them, if I spend the time to make them, and would take them to a craft show or whatever, they didn't, one of the first years that Dad had a whole bunch of them made, they did really well at a craft show. Because there was somebody there that wanted, was doing like the work Christmas ornament exchange type thing. That was like the only time. And if I'm going to make them, I usually make the ones that have a hollow globe on them, which to make them and try and sell. Then then they're no longer a $10 item. They're more like a $20 or $25, and too much. They're too much work. There is some really simple ones that are kind of fun to make. Kind of the kind of like the best of both worlds, and they're much simpler. They're just a little. I don't have one down here. Little cup on the bottom, and I'll usually use a little piece of limb wood. Um, and literally make a little natural edge bowl for the roof, and then a base. The bases are very simple. You just drill a hole in them, and there's really not much hollowing goes into them, other than drilling the hole in them. But that's just something I just don't get really wrapped up in making. I should, and maybe I will till next year. Maybe it's something I could actually do as some sort of a class or something that would maybe interest people. Yeah. Well, I just talked to him right before I come downstairs again, but yeah, I had to go over with him what all all is going to take place on Wednesday or Tuesday night and Wednesday. We're going to go to church with him on Wednesday night or Tuesday night, and then the daughter's doing the Christmas festivities on Wednesday. So now we should just go back quickly overhead. So now we're back to between centers. This is how I would do them. I've drilled the hole. Now we're going to make this round, hopefully without it flying apart. We do have this section right there that's not necessarily so great. So we'll make it, yeah. What speed do I start at? I am a bit of a speed demon, so I'm really not the good one to ask that question for. Um, this is this is pretty much spindle work, and it's pretty small. So I think I turned the base at about 18 or 1900 RPMs right off the bat. As long as there's not a vibration, that's the issue. This we'll start out a little bit slower. I always start out slow just to make sure things are going to be in balance and not go weird and things like that. Once again, we're going to be back up around 18, 1900 RPMs right off the bat. And I just go a little bit light on this. Get rid of the square corners. Multiple ways of doing it as far as the squared around. This was a really nice solid piece that didn't have that piece that's kind of iffy. I can hear it ticking, so that means there is a crack there. And your ears are your best defense. I also didn't have it as tight as I should have. Let's see, we have this little branch or whatever it is, but we're not to the round yet anyhow. The really faster way of doing it would be the skew and a peeling cut. I can show you. That's how I do the tops, or get the pieces ready to do the tops. This is a spindle roughing gouge. Not a tool that you necessarily have to have. In some ways, it's a tool that I don't necessarily, even when I teach classes, I say this would be a third tool to buy if you were buying tools. I would buy a bowl gouge, a spindle gouge, and a parting tool. That's the three main tools that you would use all the time. And I certainly could have taken that down to the round with any one of those. Could have used a spindle gouge, use a bowl gouge, either one. I messed up. I should have made that top a little concaved in there. But we'll deal with that. So that's just basically taking it down to the round. We're still going to have to pay attention because there's a little bit of that's going to come out for sure. Speed wise, I mean, just do what you feel, what you're comfortable with. The simple things of what I was taught from sort of day one is, so we drilled a hole somewhere a little, no need to guess because we can just take this off, which we're going to do multiple times and verify what we're doing. We need to know where the bottom of the hole is at. So we're just shy of an inch down. And with this being between centers, we can take it on and off. But what I was saying is, when I drilled the hole, or even before I drilled the hole, I should have cleaned up this end, made it a little bit of a concave into the center before I drilled the hole. Because now I'm still gonna do it, but you see these silver marks, that's what's gonna happen is I will cut through this end grain, make it clean, but that also means I'm gonna touch the live center with the tool, which means I'm gonna put a groove in it. I may actually switch to live centers before I do that though. And it's on a step center on the other end, it just has the teeth, so we're just gonna run that back in there. So now we know an inch is the bottom. So we want to have some meat, so somewhere down around an inch and a quarter, thereabouts. It's kind of like a, in this case would be like a do not cross line. As you can see, it lands right on that. There again, isn't going to hurt us. We're going to come up with some sort of a little bit of a design. Doing a little bit of a cup shape. And since we have the bigger, the 1/2 inch spindle gouge out, that's what we will use. And there went one of the pieces of stuff. Let's see what it did. See whether it left us a big hole. Not a giant size hole, so that's not too bad. This is up here is still pretty thick. It's probably about 3/8 of an inch thick, and it certainly doesn't need to be that thick when we're done. So we'll just bring this paper down some more. Clean everything up. And hopefully, since that had what it had, that's what I was afraid of. It's not going to, right in this area, there's some, rather than this grain running straight up and down, right up in this area, it's curved. Going to give it some little visual interest, but also with me cutting in that direction, it did not like that. So it stood the grain up right there. So we will have to address that. issue. For right now, we're just going to keep on going. I'm going to make a little bit of a shape here, and then we're going to make a tenon to fit our base. Before I take too much material off up here, because the thinner I get up here, the more vibration and flexibility it's going to have. I'll have a little bit there, that's okay. I really should have maybe got some pictures of, took a chunk out down there too. It's not really the kind of piece that one should use for this type of project. It really should be more, nice. What I will use for the class will all be nice straight grain. There'll be none of this stuff that we had to contend with for that. It's hard enough to get the people to basically do what you need them to do to start with. So we need to make a recess or a pennant to go in our recess for this. So I just set my dividers. This is a pair of dividers that has the corners rounded over so that I can slide that down over the piece of spinning wood. And what, oh, really? Oh, I gotta change that. That's not. I have a smaller one. Wasn't really planning on that part. This is why it's this is kind of why I do this stuff at home before I ever try and do it as far as to try and teach somebody. That I know we do not have over there at the store is the smaller stab center. So that means that when I do it as a class, this hole is going to be bigger. So I just have to make sure I measure the stab center because it's not, it would be almost impossible, or let's put it this way, it would be very difficult. I don't like to use the word impossible, but it would make it more difficult in this case to make this tenon down here to fit that recess if it's smaller than our drive center is. So we'll just go from there. And my wide parting tool is of course still in the bag. And I like the wider parting tools for this kind of work. It's another one of them things. This is sort of another personal preference kind of a thing. I now have 4 of these, actually 5 of them, that I made. It's just Amazon steel. It is, don't know, whatever the metric is that's close to 3. This one here is 3/8. I have 2 of them. I made 2 3/8, or I have 3 3/8. I have 2 of them, all of which I made. I have straight 3/8. I have one that's at an angle. This is the one I use for my tenons for my chuck because they're dovetailed. So the you want to call it, the slope on there matches the dovetail for my chucks. So whether I do a tenon or a recess, this will match. But I also have a couple that I made basically for doing classes that are straight. Because that's one of the things that you don't really have a nice parting tool over there. I mean, they're They are a Sorby parting tool. Most of their tools are the Sorby tools, but it doesn't. I've never seen one. It's probably total length is probably only about that long. They're just really short, and I just don't particularly care for them. So I just made my own. So we'll just make our reese or a tenant. If I get this tailstock back just far enough, I can just wind it back, get it out, check our fit. And we actually fit. That's scary. Did a good job measuring that. That's usually the issue. It doesn't. I don't want this fit here. I want it to fit. I don't want it necessarily to be real sloppy. But I also don't want to have to force that in there because that's going to get glued in. So there has to be some room, a little bit of room for glue. And we'll just use a plain wood glue for that, because there's more than enough surface area there, and it's sort of side grain to side grain, so it's a very good contact. So we drew our depth. It's about 5/8 of an inch. Once again, we don't want that to bottom out on the bottom. So we'll just make it more like 1/2 an inch. Mark us a line the whole way around. And we'll go back to our parting tool. Hardest thing to get people to understand is just because the parting tool is wide doesn't mean that we have to take full width every cut. It's easier to sneak up on things. This way, when we get to the bottom, we bring our handle up nice and level. So it's cutting right on the center line. It's wider, so that means that we can go a little bit wider across there and make it simpler. So now that fits there, and we're a little, actually in some ways, if you're really so minded, we could glue that in. Here's the magic question. Do we take that? I could glue it in, use the chuck to hold it, turn it as a complete piece. So I could actually put wood glue in there, and it's basically going to be clamped. It only takes a couple minutes for it to actually grab, but I could continue to turn while the glue is setting up. Kind of makes sense maybe if I would do it that way. Probably going to help me to make a shape. I don't think I necessarily have to, but it would be an option that we could do it that way. I think we're just going to keep on going between centers because I'm not thrilled with this piece of walnut to start with. So well, of course, neither pieces are that overly great of material, so it doesn't really matter if it fails. It's just getting sort of a concept in some ways as to what we want to do. It also gave me a tenant down there. If I needed to, I could grab a hold of that in the truck as well and do some work there. I need to get my little spindle gouge because that's normally use my little one by virtue of the handle was nice and little, so I can do more of my work right in front of me rather than contending with the handle being off to one side or the other. Let me see, is my really little one? No, it's not sharp. Because there's a couple little things off the bat that I want to do down here. For one, I want to do a little bit of a chamfer here. To meet up with that, I'm going to go up underneath. And I'm going to slightly concave that on there. That way I know it will sit flush out here. Here's where it would probably be advantageous to actually have this in place. Man, did pretty good. Could take just a shade bit more off of that. Small shade, really. You see what I mean when I say I'm constantly taking this on and off, and I'm not losing anything. Not losing it. It's not being out. It's not out of round at all. It's running true each time. So now, this would be one of these projects that you should actually maybe like draw them a little bit. Rather than just going at it like I am. I'm going to do a cove. Into there, down like that. And then we'll roll down into that corner. Some of this, this is a bowl gouge that I'm using right here. Allows me to remove material much quicker. But to do the fine details, then I'm going to have to use, then I will use the spindle gouge. But at this point, that gave me the cove down there. It kind of didn't. Like I say, design on the go is not necessarily the greatest way. They really should have had just a straight chamfer up here, which we can accomplish. You're gonna see me switch back and forth a lot. I could remove all this material with a spindle gouge, but the bolt gouge is going to let me do it quicker. We have to keep one thing in mind where there's certain rules that we don't want to break either way, either tool. We want to always be cutting downhill, which in spindle turning means going from highest to lowest all the time. And try and get a nice gentle curve down there. Somebody doesn't do much spindle kind of work, that actually doesn't look too bad. Definitely going to have to do some refining on the top, which already knew that. So our bowl gouge doesn't necessarily, as you can see when it was spinning, there's some like light and dark lines. The dark lines is where the back of the heel is sort of burnishing the surface a little bit. Not going to hurt anything, but we'll go back with our spindle gouge. And hopefully we'll make one nice little cut. Since using the big one, it's little work. We'll make a nice little small cut into that corner. We'll come back up. We'll make our bead come down around the corner. And land in that corner. Like such. If it doesn't, we go back the other way. I kind of like the way that looks. But this now doesn't look quite right to me. Still a little bumpy, but a little bit of sandpaper will take care of that. I'm just looking for my curves to be right. So far so good, I think. Yeah. Okay, look. But life, to answer your question there, that's 1900 as far as speed goes. Things you have to be concerned about is this edge right here, this edge right here. When you cut things properly, that edge just became a razor blade, both those edges. That's one of the things that I really stress in trying to teach people is you're always going to see somebody touching the wood. I said, it's your fingers. Just touch it back here on top. Do not get close to the tool rest. And you can feel lots of things. Like there's a little bit of stood up grain. Like I said, for whatever reason, this is not exactly a good piece of walnut. So now we can take, all this has been shaped. We still have plenty of support down here. And we are between centers, so we should be able to go up here to the top and make a nice shape. That's also probably where we should just change the cone. I have some of these cones that I made out of some resin. Just for this, just sort of for this kind of purpose, that when I need to actually cut into it, or could cut into it, then it doesn't really matter. It's just a piece of resin. It has been threaded to thread onto this threads, and it's still a cone center. Looks like it's considerably shorter than the other one. Bring it up. So if I nick that, it's no big deal. No big deal. Should still run pretty true. These I have trouble actually getting them as true as I would like them to be. Like I say, it's still about 3/8 of an inch thick. So let's go back this way once, because I know I came the other way with it. This could even maybe have a little bit of a curve to it, I guess. Maybe that would make it, yeah, that's, I like that look. A little better. So now we'll just work on making lighter refining cuts. Go right into the corner. When I go into the corner, the tool is up on the flute is straight up and down. That way it does not grab a hold of the other, this end grain. If I was to go in there with the flute open in the cutting position, it will grab a hold of that and you will have one of them things called a nice little catch. And probably could very well destroy your piece. We got definitely have some grain. It's going every which way but loose right there. That's still a sandable finish. It's going to be a little bit coarser sanding than what I would really care to have, but the other alternative is to go back a little bit, back the other way. And see if that takes care of it. And see, me touching it, you'll be able to feel that, and that actually got rid of that. It got rid of the place that the grain was stood up. So that was well worth that little bit of effort to do that. And now we need to hopefully sneak in there. I'm going to try it with a spindle gouge. If a spindle gouge doesn't work for me, I will pick up the skew and do it with a skew. Spindle gouge should actually do it. As you can see, there's some of the resin because it touched it. Like I said, I should have done that before, because now I left a tiny little ridge right there. There's pretty much the shape. Now the question would be, does it look right on the base? I don't know. Guess that looks okay. Definitely picked a not so good piece of cherry for the base. Definitely don't want the wormholes in it. That'll work. So that's going to be, like I said, I have no idea what this should be. So that's basically about 7.5 inches tall. Complete. I think that'll work. And of course this up here I wanted a little bit concaved into there. I'll probably just go back and cut it with this skew and make sure that I get the whole way in there. Because the spindle gouge, that spindle gouge right there is pretty new. So the wings are not back as far as what they would be on some other ones. I'll probably switch to that one. Yes. As you can see, like I say, this one is new. So it hasn't been sharpened a whole bunch of times because as I sharpen them, I will just keep extending those wings back, and it gives me a longer, pointier presentation up there. I do have another handle for them. I thought I brought it over. Yep. Longer handle, but it's not super long. Like I say, I like my short handle for doing a lot of my work, but you can see overall this tool is probably 4 inches longer. So when I'm doing fine detail work, that means it still can't be in front of me, if that makes sense. Just kind of some little idiosyncrasies that I found that I like. Gotta have enough pressure on there for it to dry. Not sure I still got that little piece out. I think so. Enough of it that's it's not gonna hurt me. Also, by doing that, I've cut across the end grain, so that is cleanly cut. Sanding is almost impossible in there anyhow. Like I said, I kind of did things a little bit ass backwards when it comes to that. I should have did this while I was in the truck and before I drilled the hole. I should have made this concave and made sure this was right before I ever drilled the hole. Just one of those things that you don't always think of everything ahead of time. It would just make life easier if I would have done it sort of in the proper sequence. So now we can sand it. Here's where we slow the speed down. The small spindle, I'll spin it probably around 6, so it's like a little over 600 RPM, something like that. Sanding is the easiest place to figure out how fast it should spin, because if your fingers are getting hot, or it doesn't seem like it's cutting, the sandpaper is not cutting, it's usually an indication that you're going too fast. But if you go too fast, then the sandpaper skips over the surface rather than cuts into the surface. This is also 180 grit sandpaper. If I did a better job shape-wise, then you should be able to start with more like 220. But there's definitely no shame in starting with a little coarser sandpaper. And get rid of your tool marks and any little bumps and lumps and all that good stuff. It just makes it a little quicker and easier. Get down into the fine detail down in that. I'm going to use the sandpaper. This is folded over. I'm going to use the cut edge of the sandpaper that's folded together to get down in there. That will allow me to get down into that surface, into that corner really nice and easily. I'm also not going to sand that edge. I'm not going to sand that either because this and this is all end grain. Same way with that. So I don't want to put 180 grit scratches in the end grain because they're very, very difficult to get out. So then we'll just move through the grits. Go to 220. Keep the sandpaper moving. I even make it so that it's like little random orbit. I'm moving the sandpaper in sort of a circular fashion, or at least keeping it moving. Otherwise, I'll leave perfectly circled, perfect little rings around the piece. And we don't necessarily want to do that. Once again, the cut edge down into that corner. I'm going to clean it off each grid I go to. And if you think it doesn't matter that you don't clean that off, my class that I did a week or so back, I guess it was, I left them sand. I left them power sand, and I didn't have my paintbrush along, so they didn't clean anything off. And the one young lady, she's like, "How's this look?" She says, "But I got scratches in the bottom here." I'm like, "Well, holy camole, there are 120 grit scratches in the very bottom of her bowl." And I took a paper towel and wiped everything off, and went from there to like 180 or something like that. And the scratches came right out, and she just looked at me like, "What did I do wrong?" And I said, "Well, I wasn't watching you, so I don't really totally know what you did wrong." I said, "But we didn't wipe off the dirt, the dust. So we're up to 320. I will sand this area now to get rid of any of the little wobbly woobs. I'm still not going to touch them other ones that are small. I want to keep the fine, crisp detail fine and crisp. So I don't round any of the edges that I only want a small round over in, which would be this one, and this one. I will do that when I get to, normally sand this stuff to about 800. I won't hit them until I get to either 6 or 800. So they're just rounded over, but yet the detail is still there. Now, if I can, I'm going to wrap the sandpaper around as far as I can. Gives me a bigger sanding surface. At 400, I'm going to touch the end grain on these. And that's all I'm doing is touching them. They're already smooth. So now I'm taking away the sharp razor blade corners. And we'll wipe off the dirt, dust. I do see there is some little scratches in there. This was a piece that I was really truly going to finish. Those scratches all need to go away. I can do them by hand, by hand right now. Some of those scratches are definitely not 600 grit scratches though. But you can get rid of most of the stuff just by doing it that way. You're sanding with the grain. You could do that if you really wanted to. You could do that at each grit. You could sand a little bit with the grain to get rid of those scratches. The scratches are not very big, but they're concentric. That's the problem. They are going straight around the piece, so I need to make them not go straight no more. So this is 800 grits. Yeah, this is 800. A little bit of random orbit sanding with the 800. And if those scratches are truly like 600, 400 or 600 grits scratches, they will disappear with the 800 by doing it that way. Like I say, this is not a piece to go on the shelf to try and sell.
This is a piece to go on the shelf at Woodcraft to show what the class is going to be about. So that's pretty much that one. And it still left a stupid ring up here. It's like I said, that's really is my mistake. That this should have been taken care of while it was still in the truck as before I even did anything else to it. I mean, I've gotten it off of there, so we'll just take a little piece of 400. I'll roll it up in a little ball or in a little tube, so to speak, and I can just go in here and round that corner off a little bit. It's going to take care of the jagged edge that it left. That should be okay. Like I say, it would have been a whole lot less work to have done it in the proper sequence. If I did it in the proper sequence, I would have sanded that little bit of that end grain there. I would have sanded as well. But this is what you call the kind of the trial and error kind of a thing. So that's one simple candlestick. Widen things back out so you can see the whole thing. That's our simple candlestick. Two different kinds of wood. I think would make it look a little bit more decorative. This could be anything that you wanted on the bottom. Well, it could be anything all the way around. Just a simple, pretty much a simple design, I think. So once it's glued back to, once this was glued back in place, if I needed to, I could put this back on the chuck and could actually come back up here and clean that end up a little bit. It's really kind of tempting just to grab another piece of cherry. What time is it? 7:45. It's about time to quit anyhow. Because the wormholes are no good in a piece like this, especially to take over there. They don't want me using any wood that could have bugs in it to start with. Because I wanted to do a natural edge bowl class, and he's like, "Well, it's not kiln dried." I'm like, "Yes, so." So no, he says we can't have that. Okay. But like I say, it would probably be interesting, and we'll maybe have to do that on the next one. Would be to glue these two pieces together. Of course, when we glue the two pieces together, my only issue with doing it over there as a class is this recess down here is going to be much more noticeable because it's a Nova chuck, and that recess is going to have to be a little bit deeper than what it does with my dovetail jaws. Because there's very little, 1/16 of an inch is really all I'm holding up in this area here as a recess. And as you saw, it holds it just fine. But the Nova chucks with the Nova jaws do not have that capability. Hmm. Yeah, so I'm not gonna put any finish on that. I'm thinking if I'd make another base, then I could use this top, even though it's not certainly not perfect by any means, but it's workable. I just have to get a. I did bring a second piece of cherry, but I think if that one had some little vermin holes in it, it's probably off the same board, so this probably has some too. Although I don't see any evidence of any. Oh yeah, right there's some. Because that would definitely be doing it ass backwards. This is also a much bigger piece. Doesn't really matter there, but there's evidence. There's tiny little pinholes right there and there and there. That's bugs. Also some little cracks in it. That's not necessarily the best piece to use for that because I'd end up in the same boat. The other My other option for a different class is going to be a square bowl. And I did show the people that were in my class, my last class, that we would do a square bowl, and they're like, a square bowl. I'm like, yes, and it'll be square when it's done. And they were kind of confused as to what that would look like. But that will be probably a March kind of class. That is one class that is selling out quickly, is the bowl turning classes. Everybody seems to want to turn a bowl. I'm not totally sure why they all want to turn a bowl, but they do. There's an offcut. It's probably not even remotely dry. I think that's a piece of white birch. I think. So, see how remotely square it is. It doesn't really matter. It's close. 5.5, about 5.5 inches across. So if we were to take and go corner to corner, close to corner, mark a center line that way, do the same thing on the other side, on the other axis. And now we have a center point there. Can mark it with an awl. Spring punch in this case. Could do the same thing on the other side. This piece is not is thicker on one edge than the other, which makes it a little bit different to work with. So in theory, if I can find a hole, we can again. Go center to center, basically. This piece will have some vibration because it's off kilter that way. Or could have some vibration. Probably will have some vibration. But like most of the things that I do anymore, I will take this, we'll flatten this out a little bit on this side. Not really. Not in my opinion, put it that way. I mean, I gotta take it over to the bandsaw and cut that, but it's just as easy to turn it away. I mean, you're talking about a 5.5 inch piece. Now, if this thing was 10 or 12 inches, or like 10 inches square or something like that, then I'm going to make sure that this is going to be parallel. Otherwise, we will have vibration, and we were probably going to pick up some vibration on this as it is, and we do. So it's only going to let me run about 1,000 RPMs at that point, which doesn't really. I'm not really concerned about that. I'm going to go in here and flatten out an area right here. That would probably make more sense if you would see it from both directions. So if I flatten out a little area, do we get it flat now? I think we got it flat enough. Almost flat the whole way around. And we can make it flat the whole way out. I don't want to get out there where it's not solid at this point, because if I do, and get out in that area right now without it being running fast or fast enough, it means I have to have super good tool control, because once I get out there and start cutting air, if it's not running fast, it's easy to take more material off than what you want to, if that makes even remote sense. This is going to be, we're going to put on some bigger jaws. Not sure that fit's going to be pretty big. That'll work, because that's, you can always take more material off. I can't put it back on, so if I leave the foot big, I can always make it smaller. Just grabbing with the left leg, not allowing the right leg to touch. I need a place for it to be able to go in there and make a little dovetail. I just pick up my spindle gouge, make a groove. This will inevitably be the top. In all practicality, just use I'm going to use my parting tool. This parting tool is also ground at the angle of the dovetail jaws. It needs a flat area in there. Relatively good size flat area. The bigger the jaws, the wider they are. So that's only about 1/8 of an inch deep, which is more than enough to actually hold on to that piece. Move some tools out of the road. The wonders of a long bed lathe is you have a tendency to lay the tools on the bed, which is not necessarily a great idea, because inevitably, sooner or later, one of them will end up on the floor. Worst case scenario, you have to go sharpen a tool, or best case scenario, I should say. Worst case scenario is it's summertime and you have shorts on and it bounces up and hits your leg. I think this is the one. Pretty sure. At which point you may need a band-aid or two. So I try and teach not to do that, even though I'm not necessarily as good at it myself as what I should be, because that scenario of blood running down your leg is me, and I did do it. Freshly ground tool. Why do you not want to go tighter, boss? This thing needs cleaned. So one of the bad things of working with a lot of wet wood, maybe that's not the right. Like I said, these are wider, much wider. That's the major problem, since we didn't make that. This is dry, or halfway dry. I can't tell you what I took it off of, to be quite honest with you. So, you make the lovely mistake that we just made. We will just put it right back between centers. You could do these in wet wood too. It wouldn't hurt them by any means. It might make for an interesting piece because it's going to move. I don't know that I'd want to do it in sopping wet kind of wood, but definitely damp kind of wood would be fine. So once again, we started between centers. My on-off switch is going bad on this lathe. I didn't get it back where it was at. Did I miss my center hole? Probably. Come on. It's the wonders of it being rough cut on that side is I evidently did not get it back in its hole. Maybe not back in its hole twice. Not going to worry with it. All I'm going to do is expand this out some more so I can get my chuck in there. That will work. This is also where it would make it easier if you did work with material that was same on both sides. That you could have switched it around without any issues. Even though really when it comes right down to it, that wasn't that overly big of an issue because it doesn't matter what I did out here, whether this is not even because I left that quarter of an inch around the tenon, so it's still going to sit in the same place. So I'm going to run the grain up and down with the jaws. Now there's enough room for it to be there. And we'll tighten it up. It'll give us the most even grip all the way around. So now we can get rid of our unevenness down here. We do have to be careful where we put our banjo at. Anytime you're working with anything out of goofiness, out of square, out of round, you have to be careful. It's always a great practice to get into is to always do the simple thing, spin the piece by hand, Stand off to the side. Bring the speed up a bit. We know our thickness is out more so out here at the outside edge. So we'll whittle a little bit of that away first. The real challenging part when you're doing things that there's air out there is not to have a heavy hand when you get out in that area. That is one of the places that speed will help. Less time between air gaps. It's not going to be a smooth finish cut there. It's just a simple pull cut. We're now in balance, pretty much. So now we can bring our speed up. So we're up to like now a little over 1900 RPMs right now. It will make our cutting easier, much more efficient. Does make it sound a little bit like a propeller trying to take off. Really all I'm after right now is to get it flat. We've still got a little bit there in one place, and that's it. So a little bit more, and I really don't need it necessarily kind of wasting wood out there because that's going to go away anyhow. So just sort of like what we did on the other side. I think we're going to try use a little bit bigger of a foot on it. Oh, microphone fell out of my pocket. So we need a place for our tenant. Once again, we're not going to use a very big pennant. So that should be big enough. We can do it a couple of ways. We can use a spindle gouge actually to go in there, right in that crack. And go in, make it a little bit of a dovetail. Back the other way to make sure it's nice and clean. And maybe even a little bit of a tiny groove in there. And that can be our foot. Probably not cutting cleanly in there by the way it feels. No, chip some right there. To do these kinds of projects, it is better off to use something that is hard. This, like I say, this is, I think, a white birch. But it's kind of been a while since I've done any of these. So now I'm going to make this tool rest be at a bit of an angle. Because we're going to make this curve. And it will just help me make our curve. Our tool has our bow gouge is a curve already. So that's pretty much all that we're going to do is follow that curve. And actually make it an OG curve if you want to. A little bit further in. and take a look. Not really much of a curve to it. But it's still, even at that, now that we've increased the speed and we're taking more time, it's just chipping a little bit out right there. But other than that, it's actually a pretty clean cut. You just had to keep an eye on our thickness up there as well, a little bit, especially when it's not overly even. It's sort of all about being gentle. Oh, I already messed up. Used to doing these more as a plate rather than a bowl. That's okay. We have a little bit of chip out there, so we will have to tend to that a little bit. I told them people we were going to do a square bowl. So we know that area right there would be the absolute max. So if we come in, let's say about 3/8 of an inch, something along those lines, to make this into a winged bowl. Gotta watch because we are getting closer to the top, at least in that one place. So it's about 3/8 of an inch. So we can't go, I don't want to go beyond that on that part. So now I will sort of go in straight, get back into our line, or at least close to our line. Yeah, it's going to be a problem, child. This is where we should have started with more evenly spaced, even thickness. Also a crack right there, and it's liable to pop off. But we still need some more room. So our room needs to come down there. Make that curve not go out to the very end. So if I finish my cut off using a bevel supported cut, it will cut nice and clean into there, right into that corner. It's definitely going to be a very shallow kind of a bowl. It also needs There's really nothing says that we can't go back this way a little bit. We make our shape what we want. Sometimes the wood will cooperate, sometimes it will not. Probably more times than not it will not, as it didn't right there. It's going to chip it, but it gave us our shape, or at least the shape that I want. So now I can go back and come back in the other direction and do like a shearing cut or a slicing kind of a cut. Tool handle's down in my pocket. I'm using the bottom wing and I'm just basically gliding across the surface ever so gently. And of course, as much as it chipped out, we might have to do this several times, or maybe not. So now it's cleanly cut, and you can see there's a little fuzzy on the edges. That's okay. We will do that. Will go away. That you have to sand these edges anyhow. So that little bit will go away. I just have to clean up around this tenon a little bit. And we'll do it the same way. You literally can take that wing right up against the tenon, pull it out ever so gently, and that cleans up that surface like almost perfectly. Except that little, there's still a little place of chip. So we got to take a little bit more out of there. This foot will remain. And now we've gotten rid of our chippies. Still a little bit of green stood up right there. But that's, I mean, that would be getting very picky right there. I mean, you certainly can keep playing with it. You probably should keep playing with it a little bit. This would be sort of like landing a plane. I'm actually starting to move forward before it touches. There you go. Oh, there you go. That's a good deal, except them suckers still won't let you go in for free, even though you're going to help them out. Am I correct? So that gave me a little groove in there. Oh, okay. Well, then that is a good deal. Yeah, that is a good deal. That's because those big symposiums are darn expensive. I've been to a couple of them over the years, but okay. Well, then that makes it worthwhile. I take it you live in, where's it going to be, St. Paul? It's colder than shit there right now, probably. It's pretty cold here, but so we'll see whether this likes a scraper. Can't imagine that it will, but we'll give it a little decoration. Oh, okay. There seems to be a lot of people that have to travel a fair amount of distance for some of that stuff anymore. It's like everything else. There's a lot of it seems to be dying out in some ways. Also has a crack right there. Like I say, this is by far the kind of piece that you should be using for this. So I kept shrinking that tenon down a little bit. See if we can, yeah, that's under an eighth of an inch. A lot less than an eighth of an inch. So that should have, you probably can look, that's going to give me, this is something I learned from watching Richard Raffin. If you get these down to where it's a perfect circle like that, it doesn't leave any marks. Which is kind of neat because basically, I mean, if this was a nice finished piece or whatever, I would have taken the time and would have sanded all that off from the start. This piece is not going to make it. This is going to break off, I'm sure, at some point. But yeah, the AAW symposiums are neat. It's just that, for one, I don't. The last one I was at, we've been to two. My dad usually goes along. Um, last one we went to was down in Raleigh, North Carolina, which was several years ago. It's quite expensive to go to them, for one, especially anymore when, the one in Raleigh I was able to drive to. It wasn't totally ridiculously expensive. But a lot of the other ones, you start having to drive there. You have maybe airfare, motels. Gets expensive in a hurry. My wife and I are going to go to the Tennessee symposium in January, end of January, beginning of February. We were going to go last year, and she ended up getting sick. Well, that's good that it comes, because we don't. In my local club, there's some people that are probably driving not that far, but are driving a fair amount of distance to come. But I'm sure your chapter's probably like everybody else. It seems to be an older person kind of thing. Okay. Like I say, we were planning on going last year, and we actually had everything set up to do it. And then, like 2 weeks before or something or other, she thought she actually had a stroke, but ended up she didn't. This is going to be very difficult because of this corner. Um, so we ended up canceling. Of course, uh, it was too late. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm 63, and we do have some young ones, but not many young ones. Although surprisingly, it's gonna really squeal out there. Come on, my switch is going bad on my lathe. It wants to shut off every once in a while. since that thing is possibly going to throw something at me, I normally stand directly in front of this. That's really the thickness that I'd rather it be, but we left that. We might just leave it alone because it's gonna. If I would go down to that eighth of an inch that is, it wouldn't work. It would just break it away. They're sure. But at any rate, the people from Tennessee, the guy was really nice. I mean, he's like, it's too late. I can't there's no refund, which I didn't expect there would be. I was like, we managed to get the motel and that kind of stuff canceled. So we didn't lose any money there. And so that was a plus. But lo and behold, earlier this year, it was actually fairly early this year, he sent me an email and he says, hey, he said, you weren't able to come last year. If you would like to come this year, you're already paid. And I'm like, wow, really? And I come home that day and I told my wife, I said, hey, he emailed me and said that if we wanted to come to this symposium this year, it just so happened I always take a week's vacation. I work for UPS, so it's always nice to take a week's vacation in the middle of winter and sort of go somewhere warm and things like that. So it just worked out that I'm on vacation that week. So it's like, well, yeah, sure, we'll be down. So it will be kind of interesting. The only the only people that are going to be there that I haven't seen do a demonstration would be the shit. Now what's his name? Black guy with the wild hair, as I would call it. He's probably the only one that I have ever seen over the years do a demonstration. The rest of them I have, but actually Trent Bosch and Loren are going to be there. Um, I actually took a class out of his place the other year. Oh, my switch is going to totally crash on there. Yeah. Well, we might be done for the night. Does it sound like it was not slowing down? I think we're done for the night. Well, we're done for the night. I was thinking gonna have to call Laguna on Monday anyhow to find out what to do with it. Now we definitely are, because now it won't even turn on. Interesting. Oh well, so much for that. Not a great time of year for that to do that to you. But at any rate, from there it's basically just doing a little bowl. From the inside, you just have square wings. The biggest thing you have to be aware of on something like that is there's wings out here. You got to make sure where your hands are at all the time, because you could one of these wings hit you, you're gonna know it in a bad way. But they're kind of different and fun to do. So other than that, that's kind of
give it a wrap. I still have to go to the grocery store yet and get some stuff for my lunch. Now when I can find my mouse, oh, it's over there. This is being done on YouTube as well as Twitch. So we will end the YouTube and then we'll go over and see if we can find anybody on Twitch